Hello, welcome everyone back to our Dirshu Bahalacha Shir. Hopefully we won't have a fiasco like we had yesterday, where yesterday was the Tainus of Shivas of Tammuz, and I set out to make my recording, and I wasn't feeling very well, and it was 95 degrees and humid, but I set out to do the recording, and I did it in 2 shots, made a nice long recording, and when I sat down to edit it, I found out that there was no sound. And I just wasn't able to do it over again. So unfortunately we lost today, but now we're back, and hopefully today I'm using dual sound, so I have a backup sound recording in case something goes wrong. I still haven't figured out what happened, but obviously for some reason the Rebbeinu Shalom didn't want it to happen. Maybe I wasn't as well prepared as I should be, maybe because it was a tainus, I wasn't going to give it over as well. But for whatever reason, the Berurah Shalom didn't want it to work, and it didn't work. Yesterday, because it was Shivas of Tammuz, I spoke about Shivas of Tammuz a little bit, and I'm going to repeat what I said, even though it's the day after Shivas of Tammuz, because I think it is very pertinent, and it is something that we should speak about. So Shivas of Tammuz begins the period that we know as the Bein HaMetzarim. It begins the period of time during which we mourn over the loss of the Beis Hamikdash, and it's not only the loss over the Beis Hamikdash, but we mourn the fact that we're in Golus, that we're not in Eretz Yisrael, we don't have a Beis Hamikdash, and what people often don't realize is that we're also mourning over the fact that we cannot live the way we are truly supposed to live. We don't have Karbonos, we don't have the Dinam of Tumah and Tahara to the extent that we should, we don't have Trumas and Maisris, we don't have all of the halachas that are tluya ba'aretz. There are so many of the Taryag mitzvahs that aren't noyeg, simply because we're in Golus. So there's a lot that we're mourning when we mourn over the fact that we're in Golus. And during this time period, it's incumbent upon us to spend some time thinking about what does it mean that we're in Golus? What could we do so that we could end this situation? There has to be a sense of urgency. What could we do to get out of Golus? What could we do to hasten the bringing of Mashiach so that we should be back in Eretz Yisrael living al pi Torah the way we're supposed to? So there's a pasuk that I always found very interesting in Parshas Nitzavim. The pasuk speaks about Golus, and the pasuk says, Ki atem yadatem, because you know, Eis asher yoshavnu be'eretz Mitzrayim, how we lived in Eretz Mitzrayim, and how we passed through the various nations that we passed through. Vatiru eshikutzeihem, and we saw their shekets. What is shekets? Rashi says shikutzeihem lefi sheriisem umois oivdei avodah zarah. You saw the avodah zarahs of the goyim. So the shekets, the disgusting thing that we're referring to, is the avodah zarahs of the goyim. You saw their avodah zarah. Ve'ez giluleihem. What's giluleihem? Rashi says, Shahayu musrachim umu'usin kigalo, that their avodah zarah was repulsive and disgusting, like excrement. So the Torah refers over here to two items. They're both references to avodah zarah, shikutzeihem and giluleihem. Both of them are lashonos that connote something mius, something disgusting. Eitz va'even, avodah zarah is made out of wood, out of stone. Kesef v'zav, and silver and gold, asher imohim, that they have with them. And then the pasuk says, I took you through all of the nations. You saw their avodah zarah, you saw their silver and their gold. Pen yesh bachem isha. Maybe there will be amongst you a man or a woman, ay mishpacha, or a family, or a shevet, or a whole shevet, Asher levavai paina hayoyim ayim Hashem Elokeinu, whose heart is turning away from Hashem Yisbarach Chas v'Shalom, laleches la'avodas alehei hagoyim ahem, and they want to go and they want to worship these avodah zarahs. Pen yesh bachem sheresh pera rosh v'lana. Maybe there will be amongst you something that will take root. It will be bitter and it will be terrible, but maybe there will be something here that will take root. And because of that, the Torah Kedosha says the Rebbeinu Shalom brings Einshim, so that people should see what happens to avodah zarah, etc., etc. What I always found interesting about this pasuk is there's a fascinating dichotomy in the pasuk. On the one hand, the pasuk refers to shikutzeihem and giluleihem, which we said are things that are disgusting. So the Torah Kedosha says you're going to go through the nations and you're going to see these repulsive, disgusting things. On the other hand, the pasuk also says kesef v'zahav, silver and gold, asher imahim. Unfortunately, many people are not repulsed by silver and gold. Many people are attracted by silver and gold. They're not repulsed by it. So you have this interesting dichotomy in the pasuk. On the one hand, the pasuk refers to shikutzeim and giluleihem. On the other hand, the pasuk also refers to kesef and zahav. And I think there's a very important lesson for us to learn over here. And that is that we need to realize not all that glitters is gold. When we're in Golus, the Rebbeinu Shalom takes us out through many different nations. We have gone and we have seen many nations, many cultures, many ways of life. We've been through the Romans, we've been through the Greeks, we've been through the Persians, we've been through the Medes, we've been through the Spain and France and Eastern Europe and Western Europe. We've been through it all. We've seen it all and we've been through it all. And Baruch Hashem, we've outlasted it all. We've been in the Middle East. We've seen every type of culture that there is. And sometimes you live in a place and you see a culture and something looks attractive. Something looks like, hey, they're living the good life. This is something that looks good. It's something that looks tempting. How many people said that the streets of America are paved with gold? Looks very tempting. It looks very nice. It looks very shiny. But you should know, the Rebbeinu Shalom tells you, I took you through all of these nations, and you might see the kesef and the zahav. But if you take a deeper look, you'll see that it's shikutzehem and giluleihem. Just because it glitters and it shines, it is clearly not gold. You want to take a look at the United States of America, you want to look at our American culture, the American culture of our day. Wow, it looks so shiny. It looks so attractive. There's so much going on. There's so much out there. Yeah? And what do the people who have found success in this country, what do? The streets of America might be paved with gold. They're also paved with drug addicts and alcoholics and suicide and an opioid crisis. And the streets of Chicago are paved with blood. You have murder and mayhem and suicide and drugs and alcohol. And you find it most where you find success. When you take a look at those who have achieved what they call the American dream, and you take a look at the lives that they lead, take a look at all the actors and actresses and the ball players, the people that are making hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're driving their fast cars, and they're living in their mansions, and what are they doing? They're shooting themselves up with drugs, and they're dying of drug overdoses. So if they have everything so wonderful, why are they using drugs? If they have everything so wonderful, why do they have to hit the bottle? If they have everything so wonderful, why do so many of them commit suicide? Because Rabbi say it's not kesef v'zahav. On the outside, it's kesef v'zahav. But what it truly is shikutzeim ve'is giluleihem. They live such empty lives, and they try to fill it up with all of this glitter and all of this shine. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't give them a life. Instead, what it fills them up with is a growing emptiness, ultimately despondency, despair, and you see where it leads. Again, on the outside, it looks shiny. On the outside, it glitters. But when you get through the outside, cut through the little thin veneer on the outside, and you'll see that it's shikutzeim and giluleihem. And I think this is one of the reasons why the Rebbeinu Shalom takes us through Golus, because he wants us to learn this lesson. He wants us to take a look at all of these cultures. Take a look at the people that live without a Torah Kedosha. Take a look at the people that try to lead lives that are devoid of ruchnius, and all they do is chase gashmius, and see where it takes them. Take a look. Is it really what you want? I can't resist but to say over, because I think, to me, it makes the point so clearly. Somebody sent me an article. Apparently, there was a television show which was extremely popular, that ran for 8-9 years. And people were mamish following this television show. They couldn't wait till the next week to get the next episode of the television show. And they're talking about what's going to happen, and what happened last week, and what's going to happen next week. And apparently, in this story of this television show, there was a woman who was the heroine of the show. And people liked this lady very much. They thought she was a special person. And they liked her so much that they decided to name their daughters after her. Okay, you have a television show and a story that runs for 8-9 years. You never know what's going to happen at the end. Lo and behold, by the last episode of the show, this lady, who was the heroine of the show for 8-9 years, suddenly became the Rishanta. She became the evil person of the show. The thin veneer that was covering her, where she looked like she was such a special person, and she looked wonderful and everything else, she turned out to be a rotten person. Oh, now we ran into a very big problem. Now you have thousands of people who have named their daughter after this supposedly wonderful person, and now it's Gevarin Nizgala that she's not a wonderful person. Now it turns out that she's a rotten person. So now you have thousands of people who have daughters named after this person, and now what are they supposed to do? Now they have their daughter named after the Wicked Witch of the West. Wow, what a terrible thing. Rabbi Sai, take a look at the difference between us and them. The Arizal says that when a father names his child, the Rabbeinu Shalom, some say the Rabbeinu Shalom, some say Malach Gavriel, comes and puts a piska in the mouth of the father. A piska, the Rabbeinu Shalom puts in, so to speak, a kvittel, a piece of paper. The Rabbeinu Shalom inserts in the mouth of the father what the name of that child should be. And that name encompasses the koichos, the strengths of that child. Everything that child is wrapped up in that name. That name is meaningful. That name means something. You know, the parents think that they stayed up the night before the bris, and they're talking about, should we name after this one? Should we name after that one? Is this one going to take offense? Is that one going to take offense? Do we identify with this one? They stay up all night, and they make a shvera decision. The Rabbeinu Shalom puts a piska in the mouth of the father, and that's the name of the child. It's divinely inspired. It's a shtik Ruach HaKodesh. So when we name our children, it's with Ruach HaKodesh. And these non-Jews are naming their children after a fictitious character in a television show. The lives are empty. Is it any wonder that we have an opioid crisis? Is it any wonder that you look out in the street and you look what their youth look like and how they comport themselves? Those are empty lives. When we come to a Shavasa B'Tammuz and we're starting the Bein HaMetzarim that culminates in the most horrible day of the year, of Tisha B'Av, it's incumbent upon us to appreciate what we have, to appreciate the Torah HaKdosha that we have, and the beauty and the meaning that the Torah HaKdosha infuses our life with. And then, once we have that realization, we have to realize that whatever we have now is only a me'ain. It's only a fraction of what we're really supposed to have. We're really supposed to be able to go b'yola regel, a shalosh regalim, go up to a Beis Hamikdash, and see the place where the Rabbeinu Shalom is mashre shchinasei b'seichenu. We're supposed to have karbanos. We're supposed to have much more than just the 3 tefillos that we have every day, which are beautiful in their own right. The fact that we have an opportunity to speak to the Rabbeinu Shalom 3 times a day. But we're supposed to also have karbanos. We're supposed to have access to the Shechina. We're supposed to have Batei Din that are miyusid al pi Torah. A Bezdin of 23 in every city. A Sanhedrin Agdoilo, Nelishkas Hagazis. How many problems that we have nowadays we wouldn't have if we had these things. How much tsaros that we have we wouldn't have. That's what we have to put our minds to during this time of the year. We have to be introspective. We have to look into ourselves. We have to ask ourselves, do we have that appreciation? What can we do to increase that appreciation in ourselves and in our children and in our grandchildren? And what could we do to bring Mashiach Tzidkenu b'meher v'yameinu? Now we'll turn back to Mishnah Berurah. We're holding on Reish Mem Ches Amud Beis. We're in the middle of Siman Shin Pei Aleph, and we are up to Sif Gimel. So this Siman has been a rough Siman. This is not an easy Siman in Shulchan Aruch at all. Just to recapture, we're talking about the topic of Bittul Rishus. when somebody is not included in the Erev, and he wants to be Mevatel Rishus, he wants to give over his Rishus to the other people in the Chotzer, so that he should not be bringing down the Erev. And we've been going through all the details over here. What it means to be Mevatel Rishus. How are you Mevatel Rishus? What are you allowed to do after you Mevatel Rishus? What are the other people allowed to do? I would urge the Chevra to try and spend some time reviewing this, because as we go further, really it's going to end in the end of this Siman. But this was a shvera topic, and it constantly builds on itself. So if we could chazer iber, if we could review it, we'll be able to maintain it in our minds. Says the Mechaber in Siv Gimel, Yesh bittul rishus bechurva. The same way we have a concept of bittul rishus when it comes to a chotzer, you could also have bittul rishus by a churva. What does that mean? What's the case? Says the Mechaber, Shem hayu shnei botim. Let's say you had two houses, and between the two houses there was some room, there was a space between the two houses, the churva beinehem, and in that space you had a rune. You had an abandoned, dilapidated house. So Ruvain lives in the house on the left, Shimon lives in the house on the right, and in between Ruvain's house and Shimon's house, you have this abandoned, uninhabited, ruined house. And Ruvain has an opening from his house into this rune, and Shimon has an opening from his house into the churva. And they both make use of the churva. Maybe they use it to dump their garbage, maybe it's their shed, but somehow each one of them are making use of this churva. So this churva ultimately is a rishus hamishutefes. It is a rishus that is being shared by two independent parties. If you want to use it on Shabbos, you're going to need some kind of erev. You're going to need an eruva chatzeros to join and make yourselves one, so that this churva is not serving two independent entities, so that this churva is being used by one entity. So you should be allowed to be metaltal. But they neglected to make an erev. So now what's the eitzah? So one possible eitzah is that either Ruvain or Shimon will be mevatel rishus to the other one. They'll be mevatel rishus that they have over the churva to the other party, and by doing so they remove themselves, they remove their ownership, their authority over the churva, and now the churva belongs to one party. So yesh bittul rishus b'churva. This churva belongs to both Ruvain and Shimon, and they both use it. And they forgot to make it a eruva chatzeros to allow them to use the churva. Either Ruvain or Shimon could be mevatel rishus over the churva to the other one, so that both of them should be mutter in tiltal in the churva. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut in Yud Zayin, the churva. The Chavetz Chaim is bothered. What exactly is the chiddush over here? What's the novelty of this ruling? If we could use bittul rishus by a chotzer, why shouldn't we be able to use bittul rishus by a churva? Says the Chavetz Chaim, V'lo yamrinon, we do not say, Shaloi hekelu chachamim bebittul rishus, that the Chazal didn't make this concept, this kula, this leniency of bittul rishus, ela b'chotzer. Maybe Chazal, this ultimately is a leniency, this is a kula, this whole idea of being soimach on bittul rishus. Maybe Chazal only made this kula by a chotzer. Why should that be? Ela b'chotzer shelafnei abotim shebahu ikar tashmisham. We've said many times that the chotzer was considered an integral part of the house. The chotzer was used for all tashmishei adira. During the week they cooked in the chotzer, they did laundry in the chotzer. But the chotzer was not just a yard, it wasn't just somewhere that you went out to once in a while. Don't forget, they had very small homes. The chotzer was an integral part of the living space. So maybe Chazal only made this kula of bittul rishus when it comes to a chotzer. Who says they did it when it comes to a churva? Kamash Malon the Mechaber, that no, you could have bittul rishus by a churva as well. Ois Katan Yurches, the Mechaber made the point, Shehi Shal Shnehem, that this churva belongs to both Ruvain and Shimon. Ayin La'el, B'Simin Shin Ayin Vav, Siv Gimel. He sends us back to Shin Ayin Vav, Siv Gimel, where it says all the details we had over there in Siv Gimel. We had a case when we had 3 churvas between 2 chatzeros. So we have over there more details about the halachas of a churva. And we could look over there to see more details of these halachas. Okay, now we go to Sif Dalid, which in my Mishnah Berurah is 2 lines off the bottom. Says the Mechaber, Yesh Bittul Rishus Mibayis Labayis. You could also have a case of Bittul Rishus going directly from one house to another house. What's the case? Shem Hayu Shnei Batim, let's say you had two houses. Upesach Beineim, and there's a doorway between the two houses. The example that I always give is what we have nowadays, the semi-attached house. You have Reuven and Shimon. They both live in a semi-attached. Reuven lives on the left. Shimon lives on the right. Inside there's an interior wall that separates the two halves of the house. Reuven owns his house. Shimon owns his house. And guess what? There's a doorway in the interior wall. So in the middle there is a doorway that does allow for passage between Reuven's house and Shimon's house. So you have two independent houses. Reuven's side of the house is his Rishus HaYachid. Shimon's side of the house is his Rishus HaYachid. But there is a doorway that goes between. V'lo yervu. And Reuven and Shimon did not join in a common Eruv Chatzeros. They don't have to. They have a doorway that goes from one house to the other. So if they desired to, they could join in a combined Eruv. That will allow them to move things on Shabbos from one house to the other. But they don't have to. If they don't want to, they won't. The door between them will remain closed, and over the entirety of Shabbos, they will not be metaltal from one house to the other. So in our case over here, they have such a case. They have this semi-attached house with a doorway, v'lo yervu, and they did not make an eruv. And now on Shabbos, they decide that they want to share their chalent. So now Reuven wants to bring some chalent over to Shimon's house, but they don't have an eruv. What do? Echad mevatel rishus lachaveroi. One of them could be mevatel rishus to the other one. So now you have bittul rishus. Now let's say Reuven was mevatel rishus to Shimon. Now Reuven was mesalik himself. He removed himself. He took off, so to speak, his rishus, his authority over his house, and he gave it over to Shimon. So now everything belongs to Shimon. Okay, if everything belongs to Shimon, you don't need a Eruv Chatzeros. You only have one balabas over here. So echad mevatel rishus l'chaveroi. One party could be mevatel rishus to the other, and if so, continues the Mechaber on the last line, va'afilu hamevatel, and even the one that's giving up his rishus, even the one that's being mevatel rishus. Let's say Reuven is the one that's being mevatel rishus to Shimon. So even Reuven, va'afilu hamevatel, muter lahoitzi mi beisai lebeis chaveroi. He will be allowed to take his chalent from his house, and he will be allowed to bring it over to Shimon's house. Now the Mechaber says va'afilu. The Mechaber says even Reuven, even the one that's being mevatel, certainly the one that's receiving the rishus, certainly Shimon. Reuven was mevatel rishus to Shimon, so now everything belongs to Shimon. So certainly Shimon could take his chalent and he could bring it over to Reuven's house. Why not? Everything belongs to him. His house belongs to him. Reuven's house, so to speak, in the context of the dinim of a Eruv Chatzeros, Reuven's house belongs to Shimon. Everything belongs to Shimon. So Shimon could take the chalent from his house, from one side of his house, and bring it to the other side of his house. Why not? The Mechaber says even Reuven's also allowed to take his chalent from his house to Shimon's house. What's the afilu? Why even? Again, why can't Reuven? Reuven also, everything belongs to Shimon. So the even is, because if you remember, we learned in Shin Pei that when somebody is mevatel rishus in the chutzner, let's say there's 20 units living in a chutzner, 19 of the units joined in an Eruv Chatzeros. Reuven, who lives in unit number 20, he neglected to join in the Eruv, so he brings down the whole Eruv. Now Reuven from unit number 20 is mevatel rishus to everybody else. Oh, so now you could carry in the chutzner. But we said over there that the mevatel, Reuven, who lived in unit number 20, he is not allowed to take anything from his house and bring it to the chutzner. Even, this is true, even if he was mevatel rishus over his house as well. So it's not a problem that he's carrying from one rishus to another. It's not a problem that his house belongs to him and the chutzner does not. Even if he's mevatel rishus over his house and the chutzner, he still cannot take anything from his house to the chutzner unless the other bnei chutzner, unless the other 19 residents of the chutzner are first machzik rishus in the chutzner. First, they have to take things out of their houses and put them in the chutzner to show that they are taking possession from Reuven, from the guy who lived in unit number 20 who neglected to join the Eruv. Should Reuven go ahead and take something from his bias, and put it into the Chatzar before the other Bnei Chatzar are Machzik Rishus, before they take possession, then we say that it's Nireh Kechayzer Machzik Berishusai. Now it looks like Ruvain from unit number 20 is taking back his Bittul Rishus. If he takes back his Bittul Rishus, he brings down the Erev again. He's reneging on his Bittul Rishus. That would be a problem. Over here, the Mechaber says that when you're dealing with Bittul Rishus from one bias to another, so even Ruvain, who was Mevatel Rishus to Shimon, Ruvain gave up his Rishus over his house and he gave it over to Shimon. You should know he is allowed to take the cholent from his house and put it into Shimon's house right after he's Mevatel Rishus, even if Shimon did not take anything out of his house and put it into Ruvain's house to show that he's taking ownership over Ruvain's house. So even if Shimon was not Machzik Rishus after Ruvain was Mevatel Rishusai, and Ruvain is still allowed to go ahead and take something from his house and put it into Shimon's house right away, and there's no problem of Nireh Kechayzer Machzik. We don't say that it looks like he's taking his Rishus back. Now, with that Hakdama, now that you understand what the Mechaber said, the Mechaber said, Va'afilu ha'mavatel mutar lo yitzi mibeis lebeis chaveroi, even Ruvain, who was Mevatel Rishus, is allowed to go ahead and take something from his house and put it into Shimon's house, and he's allowed to do this even before Shimon is machzik in his house, before he shows that he's taking possession of Ruvain's house. Now let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut in Yutes. Yesh bittul rishus bibayis labayis. You can have bittul rishus from one house to another, and it's effective. The same way bittul rishus works from one chatzar to another, it also works from one bias to another bias. Ice cut nechaf. Now, ice cut nechaf is a little touchy. It's a little complicated, but I'm going to try to spoon feed it to you. I'm going to try to explain it to you very well. Bear in mind the hakdama that I gave you. Va'afilu ha'mavatel. So first, the Chavetz Chaim says, yeah, of course, you could transfer right after Ruvain is Mevatel Rishus to Shimon. Right away, you could be metaltal from one house to the other. So first, the Chavetz Chaim is going to go mikal ala kaveh. The Chavetz Chaim is going to go from the basic principle to the more complicated principle. First, the Chavetz Chaim tells you, yes, you can now transfer from one house to the other. Why? Shaharei akol shel chaveroi. Because once Ruvain is Mevatel Rishus to Shimon, now everything belongs to Shimon. Shaharei akol shel chaveroi, everything belongs to Shimon. Kevin shabitaloi, since Ruvain was Mevatel Rishus to Shimon. So yes, you could transfer from one house to the other, because why not? Everything now belongs to Shimon. That was the simple part. Now the Chavetz Chaim is going to get a little bit more complicated. Va'afilu kaidem shehersik chaveroi beveisai, even before Shimon does something to show that he's taking possession from Ruvain, even before he does that, Yachalu lahitzi mimenu lebeis chaveroi. Ruvain could right away take something out of his house and put it into Shimon's house. And we don't say that by doing that, it looks like he's taking the rishus that he was mavatal and he's taking it back. Why? Because like the Chavetz Chaim is going to say later, how does taking the cholent from, if Ruvain takes his cholent from his house and puts it into Shimon's house, what are you worried about? That it looks like he's taking possession of his house back? How? He didn't bring something into his house. He removed something from his house. By removing something from your house, it doesn't look like you're taking back the rishus of your house. Adarabah. Really, it's the opposite. You're removing something that belongs to you from your house. So we don't have to worry that it looks like Ruvain is taking his rishus back. He's taking things out of his house. Second of all, what else are you going to worry about? That it looks like he's taking over Shimon's house? He can't take over Shimon's house. Shimon's house doesn't belong to him. If it would be a chutzner that he originally had rights to, and he was mevatel rishus of the chutzner, he gave away his rights in the chutzner. So now if he uses the chutzner, it looks like maybe he's taking his rishus back. But over here, you can't say that it looks like he's taking over Shimon's house. It's Shimon's house. It's not his. It never was his. It never will be his, unless he buys it. So we can't say that he's taking rishus over Shimon's house. So therefore, there's no problem over here at all of Ruvain taking his cholent and giving it over to Shimon. Continues the Chavetz Chaim. This is not similar to what we saw in Shin Pei, where we were discussing somebody who gave up his rishus in the chutzner, where he was mevatel rishus that he had in the chutzner to the other bnei chutzner. She'ein loy lahoitzi mi beisay lechotzer, where we said that in such a case the Mavatal is not allowed to take something out of his house and put it in the chotzer, afilu bitel gam rishus beisay, even if he even gave up the rishus over his house, ad she'achziku heim tchila, until the other bnei chotzer are maxik rishus in the chotzer. Over there we say when unit number 20 is Mavatal the rishus that he has in the chotzer, and Mavatal the rishus that he has over his house to the other bnei chotzer, over there he's not allowed to take something from his house and put it into the chotzer before the other bnei chotzer take over his rishus. Why? Because over there, if he did so, it would look like he's taking it back. And even if the other bnei chotzer are first machzik rishus, it still only works when the one who's being mavatal is unit number 20, who's giving over his rishus to a rabbim, to the other 19 units. But if you would only have two people in a chotzer, only Reuven and Shimon, and Reuven gives up the rishus over his house and the rishus that he has in the chotzer, and then he goes out and takes something out of his house and puts it into the chotzer. Over there, even if the other guy who lives in the chotzer was machzik rishus, still it looks like he's taking his rishus back. The chanal b'simin shin pei. That's what we saw in Siman Shin Pei. The choshkin b'rabim liyachid, and that certainly would be the case if you had a rabbim, if you had a group that was being mevatel rishus to one yachid. So why is our case different than those cases? Why is it that in those cases we have to be very careful that the mevatel cannot be moitzi from his house to the chotzer, certainly before the other bnei chotzer are machzik rishus, because it looks like he's taking his rishus back. And over here, when we're dealing with a semi-attached house, we say Reuven could be moitzi from his house to Shimon's house even before Shimon is machzik rishus, and we don't say that Reuven is taking his rishus back. Why? What's the nafkamina? What's the difference? Says the Chavetz Chaim, right by the ice cut and Yud Beis of the Shar HaTzion, the Hasam, because over there in Shin Pei, when we're talking about somebody who was mavatal rishus over a chotzer, kevan shahayaloi chelik b'chotzer, since Reuven originally had rights in the chotzer, he had ownership over the chotzer. Nira kechayzer mi bitulai. Now, when he starts to use the chotzer again, it looks like he's backing out of his bittul. Umaksik bechelkoi shabachotzer, and he's once again taking back his rights in the chotzer. In contrast that to our case over here, where you're talking about from one side of the house to the other, where Reuven never had any ownership in Shimon's house. So you can't say that Reuven is taking back Shimon's house. You can't say that it looks like Reuven is taking over Shimon's house. It's Shimon's house. The Gamla Inyan Beisa Gufa, and even by Reuven's own house, we're not going to say that by virtue of the fact that Reuven is taking his cholent and putting it into Shimon's house, it looks like he's taking back the rishus that he was mavatal over his own house. The other Rabbah, quite the opposite. What he's doing is he's further removing himself from his house. He's taking his cholent out of his house and he's putting it in Shimon's house. So he's further removing himself from his house. He's not taking rishus back in his house. Okay. So far the Mechaber said over here in Siv Daled that when you have this semi-attached house, Reuven could be mevatel rishus to Shimon, and once he does so, Reuven would be allowed to take things out of his house and put them into Shimon's house, and he could do that even before Shimon is machzik rishus in Reuven's house. Now we're on the bottom line of Reish Mem Ches Amud Beis in the Mechaber. Now the Mechaber is going to tell you what you cannot do. Avol eino yachal lahaitzi mi beis chaveroi lebeisoi. But what Reuven cannot do is he cannot go into Shimon's house, take Shimon's cholent, and bring Shimon's cholent into his own house. That would be a problem. She'oz, on the top of Reish Mem Tes Amud Aleph, she'oz hayachayzer u'machzik b'rishus shabita. Because if he would do that, that would show that he's taking back ownership over his own house that he was mevatel rishus. Reuven was mevatel rishus over his house. Now he's taking Shimon's possessions, he's taking Shimon's cholent, and he's bringing it into his own house. That looks like he's being machzik rishus in his house. So now he's being chayzer from his bittul, and that will be a problem. Says the Chavetz Chaim, and I cut the Chaf Aleph, Chayzer u'machzik, v'afal gav de le'el b'simin shin pei sef Aleph. The Chavetz Chaim is going to note over here that it looks like there's a discrepancy between here and what we said in Shin Pei. Afal gav de le'el b'simin Shin Pei sef Aleph mevur. Even though we explained earlier in Shin Pei sef Aleph, dim bitel rishos chatzeroi lachaverov, that when a person is mevatel his rishos in the chotzer to the other 19 units that live in the chotzer, the mutter loy lahaitzi mi beisam lachotzer, he's now allowed to go to one of the other 19 units and take something from there and bring it into the chotzer. So again, in the case of bittul rishos by the chotzer, where you have 20 units in the chotzer, and Ruvain, who lives in unit number 20, forgot to join the area, he was mevatel rishos to the other 19 b'nei chotzer, he's now allowed to go to one of the other 19 houses, take a lawn chair from the other 19 houses, and bring it to the chotzer. He's allowed to do that. He's not allowed to take the lawn chair from his own house and put it into the chotzer, unless the other b'nei chotzer were maxik rishos first. But from the other 19 houses, he is allowed to. And we don't say that it looks like he's taking his rishos back. So how come over there by the chotzer, the one who's mevatel rishus is allowed to go into one of the other houses and take something to the chotzer, and over here in Shin Pei Aleph, when Ruvain is mevatel rishus from his house to Shimon's house, he's not allowed to go into Shimon's house and take something from Shimon's house to his house. Why the discrepancy? So over there in Shin Pei, so the Chavetz Chaim explains the difference. Hasam, over there in Shin Pei, Mayri b'yachid legabe rabin. We're talking about a yachid. We're talking about Pliny Almaini, who lives in unit number 20, legabe rabin, who's being mevatel rishus to the other 19 b'nei chotzer. So we have a yachid that's being mevatel rishus to a rabbin. The choshev rak ka'ireyach legabayu. In such a case, when we have a yachid that's being mevatel rishus to a rabbin, we say that the yachid becomes the guest. He becomes the ireyach by the rabbin. So Mr. Pliny Almaini from unit number 20 is a guest by all the other people. Listen, if I'm a guest by you, you certainly let me take a lawn chair from your house and bring it onto the lawn for the Pirkei Avos. So if I take a lawn chair out of your house and I put it into the chotzer, I'm doing so as a guest. I'm doing so in my status as your guest. So then we don't say that it's nira kechayzer or machzik. Now we're not going to say that it looks like I'm taking my rishus in the chotzer back. Aval hacha. But over here in Shin Pei Aleph, when we're talking about Ruvain going into Shimon's house, taking the cholent from Shimon's house and bringing it back into his house, hacha mayri b'yachid legabe yachid. Over here we're talking about an individual. We're talking about Ruvain legabe Shimon. So it's one yachid by another yachid. One yachid, one individual is being mevatel rishus to another yachid, to another individual. The yachid legabe yachid loy hevi oireach v'chanal b'siv dalid. And if you remember, we said over there in Siv dalid that a yachid is not a guest halachically by another yachid. We said that we only say that a guest, that somebody becomes a guest when it's a yachid legabe rabbin. Since Ruvain is not halachically considered to be becoming Shimon's oireach, to be becoming Shimon's guest, so now, if Reuven goes and takes the cholent from Shimon's house and brings it into his house, he's not doing it in the context of being a guest of Shimon's. So how is he doing it? It must be he's a balabas. He's a ganza balabas over here. So then we're worried that it's nira kechayzer u'machzik. Ulefizeh, according to this, the Chavetz Chaim says, afilu im helzik zeh shebitluloi. Even if Shimon was already machzik rishus, gam kein also lamavatel lohitzil lebeisai. Still, Ruvain is not allowed to go into Shimon's house and take something from Shimon's house and bring it into his own house, v'chanal b'simin shin pei sef daled, because it looks like he's being chayzer u'machzik. It would take away his bittul and it would bring down the eruv. Okay, let's push through to the end of Siv Daled. Let's go back into the Mechaber. In my Mishnah Berurah, it's on the top line of Reish Mem Tes Amud Aleph. V'chein, says the Mechaber, a similar din. Im yesh loy cheder pasuach lebeisai. Let's say somebody has a house, and he has in his house, he has a room, a separate room in his house. Maybe it's the master bedroom. And he doesn't want to be mevatel rishus over the master bedroom. So, He wants to be Mavatal Rishus over his house. His house, let's say his house, the semi-attached house. So the main part of the house, he wants to be Mavatal Rishus to Shimon. But he doesn't want to be Mavatal Rishus over one of the rooms. One of the rooms he wants to maintain for himself. Ubitel Rishus Beisai, he's Mavatal Rishus of most of his house over to Shimon. So that part of the house is now going to belong to Shimon. But this room, my master bedroom, I want to keep private for myself. So I'm not Mavatal Rishus over my master bedroom. So now, to take from the kitchen and from the living room, dining room, and from the playroom, and from the pantry, I could take from all of those rooms into Shimon's house. Because that all belongs to Shimon. I was Mavatal Rishus. But in my master bedroom has walls and it has a door. So I could cut off my master bedroom from the rest of the house. I could close the door and say, this is my separate Rishus. It doesn't bring down my Bittul Rishus from the rest of the house to Shimon, but the master bedroom I want to keep separate. Well, if you do that, Asr lahoitzi me'acheder lebeisai. Now it will be Asr for you to take your Sefer that you brought into your master bedroom. You want it to be Mavisedra Friday night in the quiet of your own room, and you have a Shabbos lamp, and now your Chumash is in your room. Now you're not going to be able to take that Chumash from your master bedroom into the rest of the house because it's two separate Rishuyos. Your master bedroom, you retained your rights over the master bedroom, so that's yours. The rest of the house, you Mavatal Rishus to Shimon. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut and chav beis. Me'acheder lebeisai, you can't transfer from the room, from the master bedroom, to the rest of the house. V'hu adin mibayis lechadroi. Also, you can't go vice versa. You can't take a sefer or take a snack from the rest of the house into the master bedroom that you retained for yourself. Because you're going from one rishus to another. Can't do that on Shabbos. Now, very interesting. V'ayin ba'achroinim, the Chavetz Chaim says, he brings down over here, b'shem the achroinim, in the Sharitzion, he says this is a Prisha and a Chemed Moshe, shehelu, that they put forth the notion, da'afilu in bitel gam rishus chadroi behedya, even if what you do is, you're Mavatal Rishus over the house to Shimon, and then you say, I'm also being Mavatal Rishus of the master bedroom to Shimon. Even in such a case, the Achronim over here say, you cannot transfer from the bedroom to the rest of the house. Because now it looks like you're being chayzer u'machzik in the rishus of the house. This seems difficult for me to understand. I don't really have a pshat in it. But so the Chavetz Chaim brings down b'shem some achrayim the chanal le'inyin mibeis chaveroi lebeisai. Okay. Now let's go back to the words of the Ramah. In my Mishnah Berurah, it's the second line on Reish Mem Tes Amud Aleph. Haga, says the Ramah, v'yesh imrim, there are those that say, v'yesh imrim, de'ein levatel mibayis lebayis, you should not use this kula of bittul rishus from one house to another house. Ela im ken yasher la'atzmoi cheder echad shaloi bitel. You should go ahead and retain rights over one room in your house. If you're going to be mevatel your house to your neighbor's house, you should retain the rights over one room and not be mevatel one room in your house to Shimon. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Kat L'Chav Gimel. V'yesh imrim de'en levatel. Excuse me. Says the Chavetz Chaim, why do these people say like this? The Ramah is going to bring this down, the Beis Yosef, the Rabbeinu Yeruchim, the Rabbeinu Tam. Why do they say this, that you should retain Rishus over one room? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Lefi sheyesh lachush, because there's reason to worry. Shaloi tishtakach teras eruv, that the din of Eruvei Chatzeroi should not be forgotten. Mi batim elu apsuchim zelozeh, on these semi-attached houses. I remember when we first came up with this topic of the semi-attached house, it was a big chiddush to the chevra that you can't be mitzi from one house to another house. You're not going to a chutzner. It's not like the case of the bungalow colony where you have 20 bungalows and then a common yard, and you're going from one of the bungalow colonies that's miyuchid to one person out into a common rishus that's miyuchid for all 20 bungalows. No, over here you're going from one rishus hayachid straight to another rishus hayachid. Who said you can't do that? So we proved that you're not allowed to do that. So over here the Mishnah Berurah says, if you're going to be mevatel rishus from your side of the house to Shimon's side of the house, and now everything's going to be mutter, we're afraid that it's going to be nishtakach teres erev. People are going to forget that in such a case there's a din of a Eruv Chatzeros. Shekulam yevatlu ba'aleim le'echad. Everybody will be mevatel rishus. V'gam heim yu mutarim lo'hitzi kolechem mibeisei lebeis chaveroi. Ha'il ve'ena nira kechayzer machzer b'shutza b'itzazu. Everything's going to be mutter, and we're not going to be worried about nira kechayzer or machzer. So we're going to have a problem. The whole din of Erev is going to be forgotten here. Masha ein kein kishamasher cheder echad. But if you hold back one room, sha'asar lahaitzi bimenu labayis. So now, even after your mevatel rishus to Shimon, now you're going to be restricted. You're not going to be allowed to take something from your master bedroom to the rest of the house. V'im haya eruv. But if you and Shimon would have made a joint eruv chatzeros haya mutter, then everything would have been mutter. Nimtza mistaker hu be'eruv. So now there's a maila in making an eruv over doing bittul rishus. Since by bittul rishus we tell you that you should retain rights over one room, and when you retain rights over one room, you are now restricted that you can't be metaltal from that room to the rest of the house. Mashain Kane, if you would have made an eruv, you would be allowed to. So it turns out that there's a distinct difference between making an eruv and between doing bittul rishus. Now we don't have to worry that the din of eruv chatzeros by attached houses is going to be forgotten. We don't have to worry that that's going to happen. This reminds me, they used to say many years ago, I don't know if this is still true, that in Elizabeth, in the town of Elizabeth, New Jersey, Rabbi Teitz, who was the Rav, the longtime Rav in Elizabeth, Rabbi Teitz Sr., he would have a policy that one Shabbos a year, there was no Eruv in Elizabeth. Like this, there was an Eruv all year round. One Shabbos, they took down the Eruv, and they announced all over the town, they made sure everybody knew that this Shabbos there's no Eruv. And the reason Rabbi Teitz did it was because he said, if the children are going to grow up in a town where there's always an Eruv, that they're going to forget totally the din of Haitzah. They're never going to remember that there's such an Isser, of an Isser Haitzah. They're going to go somewhere else. They're going to carry outside Rosh Hashanah. People, not real Rosh Hashanah, but they're going to carry outside. People are going to say, what are you doing? You're carrying. Is it carrying? There's something else about carrying? They're totally going to forget that there's such a din of Haitzah. So to get away from that problem, he was mevatel the Erev 1 week a year. Says the Ramah Vayter, right by the Ois Kotn Chav Daled for the Mishnah Berurah, the Oz mutter lahachnes afilu mi beis chaveroi lebeisoi. If you are mevatel rishus and you retain rights over one room, then it is mutter to transfer from your house to your friend's house. What does this mean? Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Oz mutter lahachnes. Ayin b'magen Avram shetama al zeh. The Magen Avram reacts in wonderment to this Ramah. What is the Ramah talking about over here? We've already established that when we're discussing this din of bittul rishus, we're talking about Ruvain and Shimon. Ruvain lives in one side of the house, Shimon lives in the other side of the house, and Ruvain, who's a yachid, one individual, is being mevatel rishus to Shimon. He's being mevatel rishus to another individual. So we have a yachid that's being mevatel rishus to another yachid. It has to be talking about that, says the Chavetz Chaim. Because let's say we were talking about a somewhat different situation, where we had not one semi-attached house opening to another, but somehow we have one house that's opening onto 3 or 4 houses. And one guy forgot to be mevatel rishus of his house, and the other people in this funny house, where everything opens up onto each other, they all joined in one Eruv, and they left him out. And now when he's being mevatel rishus, it's a yachid being mevatel rishus to a rabbi. If we were talking about that case, di b'yachid legabe rabbim she'ervu, if we're talking about a case where one individual is being mevatel rishus to a chevra that joined in an eruv, im kein su lo shayach loyme she'ishtakach teres eruv kevin she'ervu. Now you can't tell me that the mevatel should retain his rights over one room, because if not, the din of eruv chatzeros is going to be forgotten. What do you mean? Now we're talking about a case where one guy, Ruvain, is being mevatel his rishus to the other guys who live in the other 4 attached houses, who all joined in an eruv. So how could you tell me that it's going to be nishtakach teres eruv? This only works because they joined in an eruv. So this whole Ramah wouldn't apply, that you have to retain a room. So clearly the Ramah is talking about a case where it's a yachid that's being mevatel rishus to a yachid. And in that case, the Ramah says that when the Yachid is Mevatel Rishus, he should retain his rights over one room. Ela D'mayri b'Yachid l'gabi Yachid. We have to be talking about a case where an individual is being Mevatel to an individual. V'im kain hayach shari lahaknis mibeis chaveira lebeisai. So then, how could the Ramah say that after you do the Bittul Rishus, Reuven is allowed to go into Shimon's house and take something from Shimon's house and bring it into his house? That's what the Mechaber just finished saying you're not allowed to do. The Mechaber said that when Reuven is Mevatel Rishus over his house to Shimon, in the semi-attached house scenario, Reuven is not allowed to go into Shimon's house, take Shimon's cholent, and bring it into his house. Because if he does so, it's nirek k'chayzer amazik. It looks like he's taking the Rishus of his house back. So the Mechaber just finished telling us clearly that you're not allowed to do that. Says the Ramah that, if you're Mevatel Rishus, you should retain your rights over one room. And then if you retain your rights over one room, now you're allowed to do exactly what the Mechaber said you're not allowed to do. Why? What changed? Came the Yachid l'gabi Yachid lo mikri areach. Since when you're talking about two Yechidim, like we explained in great detail in Ois Kotnechov, when you're talking about an individual being Mevatel Rishus to another individual, he can't go to Shimon's house and take the cholent because he's not Shimon's guest, so it looks like he's taking back his Bittul Rishus. Came the Yachid l'gabi Yachid lo mikri areach. Ve'vikilu chayzer machzir b'veisai. And we said that even if Shimon already took possession, so to speak, over Reuven's house, Reuven is still not allowed to go into Shimon's house and take his cholent into his own house. So what's the Ramah talking about here? V'ayin b'chemed Moshe. You take a look at the Chemed Moshe, Shetirates, he's metaritz for the Ramah, and he says, the din zed the Ramah, mayri b'yachid l'gabe rabim, that the Ramah is talking about a funny house where the Yachid, where Reuven is being Mevatel Rishus not only to Shimon, but let's say to Levi and Yehuda as well. Levi and Yehuda also have houses that are attached over here, and Reuven's house opens up to them also. So he has to be Mevatel Rishus to those three also. Now, the Chavetz Chaim said that L'chayri can't be talking about that case. Why? Because in that case, how would we have Bittul Rishus? We would only have Bittul Rishus if Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda joined in an Eruv. Reuven got left out, and now Reuven is going to be Mevatel Rishus to Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. And the Chavetz Chaim said, we can't be talking about that case, because then the Ramah wouldn't have said that we're worried that the din of Eruv Chatzeris is going to be forgotten. Because what do you mean? Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda had to make an Eruv, so you're not going to forget the din of Eruv. So how is the Chemed Moshe going to answer that? Says the Chemed Moshe, Ella, Sha'oisan Rabim, Hayudarim Bebayis Echad. What happened over here was, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda do not have three distinct houses. Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda live in one house that's attached to Reuven's house. In such a scenario where Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda were not required to join in a combined Eruv. Yet, when Reuven is Mevatel Rishus, he has to be Mevatel Rishus to all three of them, because all three of them own the house that they're living in. And in such a case, Reuven is Mevatel Rishus to them, and over here it's also considered a case of a Yachid being Mevatel Rishus to a Rabim, and since it's a Yachid to a Rabim, so it's no longer an individual to an individual. Now it's an individual being Mevatel Rishus to a Rabim. So now he's Nasik Ha'Ireach, now he's made like their guest, and that's why the din now is different than what the Mechaber said. The Mechaber said, when you're dealing just with Reuven and Shimon, so then Reuven can't go into Shimon's house, take Shimon's cholent and bring it into his house, because it looks like he's taking back his Bittul Rishus. But if Reuven has to be Mevatel Rishus to Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda, now it's a Yachid to a Rabbim, now he becomes a guest by the Rabbim. Now, if he retains Rishus over one room in his house, that's when the Ramah says you're allowed to do this, because now we don't have to worry that you're going to forget the din of Berurah Chatzeros. So he's Mevatel, he retains his rights over one room. He's Mevatel the rest of his Rishus to Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. It's a Yachid to a Rabbim. He is a guest by the Rabbim. Now he can even go into Shimon's house, take Shimon's cholent and bring it into his house, because now he's doing it in his context as being a guest. Now it's not nirek k'chayzer or maksik. He could do this even before Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda take possession over his Bittul Rishus. Okay, this concludes a very, very complicated Sif Dalid. Mirza Hashem, tomorrow we will finish off Siman Shin Pei Aleph, and we'll get into a little bit easier territory. I'm sorry again for what happened yesterday. Thank you so much for using these videos. When I look online and I see that they're being used, it gives me the kayak to do it. So thank you so much. I can't wait to see you in person. Be well.